about to give out my greatest secret to collecting, and I feel like I'm shooting myself in the foot by giving you guys this information. Now the funny thing is, none of this information is new. I want to dive more into it and talk about why this is more of a thing that you guys should consider rather than avoid, why you guys should collect Japanese games over an American version. I want to give everyone something to think about. What is it that you collect for? For me, I collect because I like to display something. So I'm not super picky if it's in Japanese or not, because I'm not going to really play this. This is going to sit on a shelf. I have a playable copy. You don't have a playable copy, you can just emulate the game. That's the great thing about it. I used to have this preservation mentality where I had to have all these for the future, but to think about these games existing but not the internet, that's kind of weird. The internet's going to exist, allowing you to play ROMs, allowing you to play newer versions of these games. So these are not going anywhere. This is just going to look good on a shelf. I know that's why a lot of us are collecting. If you're collecting for a different reason, let us know in the comments. But yeah, we're collecting to put this stuff on a shelf. Now there's a few exceptions to why video game preservation still is a problem today. If we look at stuff like in the previous video that I made, talking about Tamatown from Tamagotchi, that was a website that was taken down, and it's very hard to get that information nowadays. So something like that, if you want to check on the card above to see why it was so hard to get information on the game itself, you'll find out why in that video. Also, another thing you need to consider is, are you collecting to sell? Because if you're collecting to sell, then yes, buy the American inbox, complete inbox versions of the games that you love, because these are going to always rise in price. The same thing with these Japanese versions. These Japanese games are going to rise in price. The more and more that people get into collecting, the less of these that are going to be available in the wild. Buy any of this stuff really if you're looking to sell, but that's kind of a bad reason to get into video game collecting, because you could just get into stocks, you can get into cryptocurrency, you could get into selling. One, this should be always considered as a hobby, and I know people are going to come into it and ruin it and do what I just said, which is they're going to want to sell stuff. If you're looking to sell, yes, buy the most profitable, expensive things, because realistically it's going to always keep rising. There's going to be a die-off point when a lot of the die-hard fans and the hardcore fan base dies off, but that's going to be decades down the road. Do you buy copies to play? Because if you do, you want to consider if it is a heavy RPG game or something like this, which is a action platformer game. Very little text. I think when I loaded this up, all you really had to do was jump through the title screen and stuff like that. The difference between this was I paid 20 bucks, or I probably paid 15, because I got all of these for $40, whereas all these loose, I got all these for probably 70 bucks. And that's the thing, the price charting information on Donkey Kong Country alone, the pricing for the Super Famicom Super Donkey Kong games are a fraction of the price compared to what you can get with Donkey Kong Country and NTSC in the States. And here's the biggest thing that I don't think a lot of people take into account. If you buy a new complete in-box version of a game in the States, an NTSC version that looks mint like this almost, you could be running into the case of it being a reproduction thing. Whereas if you do that with the Super Famicom or the Nintendo 64 in Japan, almost 100% of the time, that stuff's not going to be reproduced, because nobody cares about this content. Nobody cares about Pilot Wings on this compared to Pilot Wings on the American N64. The N64 in America is what everybody wants to collect for. They don't want to collect for this. That's another great thing about collecting for the Japanese versions, is you don't have to run into the fact of it being fake. So we're going to take a look at Super Donkey Kong 2, which is essentially Donkey Kong Country 2. And I want to show you guys what you end up getting in these, because it's equivalently the same thing but in a smaller footprint that you would receive with the Super Nintendo release. The Super Famicom stuff is just as similar, if not better, because of the pricing. And you receive almost the same kind of quality content. You get all this doodad crap that they would have got in Japan. You get a game, and you get a manual. Sometimes you get another insert. So like, for example, if we go and look at the one in here, there's a thing that the other one didn't have. You get something like this, which shows you how to play the game. I'm missing that one in the Donkey Kong Country 2 one. But that's just something to take into consideration. Now, I think a big thing that people usually will look against when they want to go for something like this to play is because they have an American version console. And if you look inside, there's the tab right there that prevents you from playing. It's going to allow you, if we take an American cartridge, it's going to allow you to put this in. Just like that. But you can't do it with this. It's just not going to go in. You hear it clanking. Press this. You hear it going. So that's where you can go the route of two things. You could get a clone console, or you can emulate. But I know for a lot of people they're going to want to do a clone console because it's going to be more closer to the legitimacy of collecting physically. But for example, you can stick this cart in the same spot, goes all the way in, same cart, different language, goes in the same spot too. The only difference with a lot of these Nintendo consoles was the lockout chip that prevented you from playing these games, or essentially just how the console designed the cartridges. You can see the indents on the American version. They're present to prevent the Japanese ones and the PAL version cartridges from connecting to an American console. All you gotta do is peel that tab out and you can play Japanese games on your console. And there's purists that are gonna say, don't do that. Don't cut out the tabs. But why not? You're making a modification to a console that is going to allow you to play games. I never understood I don't want to take the tabs out because it's not going to allow me to keep the console in a good condition. I mean, look at this. It's all dirty, it's all nasty, it's all a piece of shit. It's from the 90s, okay? It doesn't look buttery smooth. I get if it's like a super minty console. I don't do it because I have this console. This console does everything I need it to do. And I'm not super heavy into playing the games that I buy because I go the emulation route and I play games on the emulator. Now, the reason why you should collect the Japanese versions of games on your favorite consoles is because there's going to be things that you can't get in the Americas that you can get in Japan. Now, some titles that come to mind are Neon Genesis, which is a fantastic anime that a lot of us love to watch. They had a game that only came out in Japan. Same with Wonder Project, which is a game that looks very similar to the Studio Ghibli films, and Sin and Punishment, which is also on the Nintendo Switch Online service. These are games that you can't get that you can get if you got a Japanese version of the game. Some of those titles that I mentioned are a bit pricey, but that gives you an idea that there are games that are only exclusive to the Japanese library. Same thing with the American library. There's some games that just aren't on the Japanese library, but that's just how it goes. And I'm also in the process of trying to get a Japanese copy of Perfect Dark because if you look at these box arts, the box arts that we usually get in America, very boring, very bullshit, very stupid, very bland, very simplistic. For what? To appear super cool, super what? The Perfect Dark box art in America was just a silhouette of Joan of Dark, her face. But in Japan, they got a really sexy version of an agent on a couch in this very red, super dark undertone sort of setting, and it's just 20 times better. And the price is the same, close to about the same, and you're getting something that looks minty. And I don't think a lot of you guys understand, the Japanese take care of their shit. Yes, it's a little beat up, it's a little played, but they didn't throw the box out, they didn't just keep the carts, they kept everything. They kept everything nice, and that's just the part of their culture, and that's what I love about their culture, is they're very clean, they're very organized, they're very neat, and that's why we're able to have nice things like this for very cheap. On my channel, I aim to make nostalgic videos and gaming content very similar to what we just did in this video today. So if you want to check out a playlist that shows all the nostalgic content that I've done, you can check this card right here, and it will take you to all the videos that I've worked on previously. And if you want to stay up to date with more content similar to this today, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys. Leave a comment down below what you think of the current landscape of today's retro video game collecting. And until then, thanks for watching and have a good one.